Yeah, it's Thursday morning. I'm on the balcony right now. The birds are chirping, and yeah, I appreciate you doing this, man. How are you?
Oh, well, I'm jealous. That's how I am. Yeah, we're over in the UK here, so you can imagine it's cold. It's dark outside. Yeah. Do you want to trade over the winter months? Yeah.
Uh, you can come here. I don't know if I feel like I'll trade, but you're more than welcome to come to the city anytime you want, T.
Yeah. So really important discussion. Firstly, thank you very much for coming on. For everyone who may not be aware of the amazing work that you're doing on social media, if you just want to give a little intro about yourself, about the mission, and just about your own mental health journey, and
Sure.
why you think it's important to raise awareness.
Yeah, I can give you a quick 2-minute synopsis if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, when I was 18, I failed out of college. I had a 0.59 GPA, and my dean of my program told me that Zachary, university isn't right for you. My parents said move out. My younger brother stopped looking up to me. I lost all my friends. Really bad headspace. But at the time, I wasn't really aware. And I think when I joined this live, what you said is scale 1 to 10, where's your anxiety? And I think self-awareness is everything. So I wasn't aware of those thoughts at the time. Over that next year, I figured out academically what I need to do in order to be a good student and get back in a program to then now 5-6 years later, apply to medical school. So now, then 5-6 years later, I had about 9 months, 10 months before I started medical school to do something, either work or a passion or something. I had time. So I'm like, I kind of have a story here. So I put my transcripts up on Instagram one day, me failing out of college, my 0.59 GPA. I had no followers. I just put up a post. And I'll never forget, someone messaged me, this random stranger from the US, Vermont or the US, and they opened up their story and they were vulnerable and real and raw and saying that there's like complete strangers. Like, I was blown away that social media could be used for good. And we ended up connecting, and I'm like, I probably should just continue on with this. So every night I hosted an Instagram live with a medical student, a resident, a doctor for 4 months straight, every single night, networking and learning from them and just try to build a place where people felt safe to share their story, because I believe in this like mentor-mentee continuum. And you see medical students or doctors or these successful people, but you don't hear a lot of the stories of the struggles or adversities or whatever they went through. And them willing and wanting to share that really creates this open space for academically for them to excel. So then a test prep company in the US reached out to me. They said, Zach, I want you to travel to the US and speak at all these pre-medical conferences to empower students. And they wanted me to speak because I failed out of college, not because I was a perfect student, because they felt that was relatable. And I loved that. That was a really humbling and awesome experience. And then I moved to Australia in 2020. In January, COVID happened. Then I had knee surgery because I tore my knee playing basketball. So my outlet usually is like working out, my mental outlet. So I lost that. I went through a 6-year long-term distance relationship breakup. Then medical school is really challenging. So a lot of these things were happening at once. And I recognized I was in a similar headspace that I was when I was 18 or 19 years old. Just this time I'm recognizing it. And I recognized when I was talking to all these things, did all these academic things, how superficial I was to say, get mentorship, get motivation, do this, do that. But when you're in that headspace, you know what you want to do, but you don't have the capacity to do it. So I enjoyed the complexity of trying to get into my thoughts. In med school here, they really speak about seeking psychological services, and there's free counseling services for all medical students. So I'm like, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? I've never sought after mental health support before, so I did. And they said, Zach, what you should do is probably journal your thoughts. I'm like, all right, I can journal them. So I journaled them for like 2 nights straight. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just do what I did with the transcripts? Why don't I just journal my thoughts on like social media and hope that maybe it'll connect to 1 or 2 people? So I did that with TikTok. And then that thing snowballed to like 450,000 in like 6 weeks. And
What made you choose TikTok?
Yeah, good question. So I really always enjoyed like sharing. Like I feel like the most powerful way to connect with someone is in person, but you can't, so video form. So I think music in person and speaking, I think that's a really powerful way. TikTok was also undersaturated at the time. I'm a male, so there's more stigmatization behind it. Medical student, you can't be having mental health issues. So I think it was a lot of things at once. And then 2020, I think mental health has become this thing that has become more comfortable to speak about. And more importantly, you can no longer suppress those thoughts because more alone with your thoughts. So I don't think it's, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I don't know if it's more prevalent, but I think we're just becoming more self-aware. And it was connected with people. So then we started a thing called, me and my friend, he's a psychiatric resident, well, applying for interview season right now for that in the US. We started a clothing company called the Mental Health Movement and a podcast called the You Matter Most podcast, with the whole goal to destigmatize and normalize. And I gave you that full long story just to say, like, the academics, I created a formula: vulnerability equals relatability equals empowerment. And I think that's the same when you speak from a mental health perspective. And that's kind of like a long journey.
No, and that's a fantastic journey. Thank you very much for opening up and just giving an insight into the reason that you wanted to pursue, obviously, the mental health career. Just going back to TikTok, obviously, like you say, learning and learning to become a medical doctor. Was there any stigmatization around you jumping on board and doing TikTok videos? Did you, like, from your peers or colleagues, did anyone say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that?
Yeah, I still get that. And it's that perspective because you're just on TikTok, one, as like a professional, and then two, you can't open up, you can't share your emotions, you can't actually be a human because it makes you look weak, or like, how are you going to be able to do like critically think and judge? Like, yeah, so there's tons of stigmatization behind TikTok still. But I've learned at the end of the day, I know what I'm doing for the right reasons. It's creating an impact, I feel, and I beat to my own drum. So as long as I can express that if anyone ever had concerns or questions, people can judge all they want. I think I believe in what I'm doing.
No, that's yeah. And obviously, it'd be so rude not to ask, two males being on a platform talking about mental health. Fantastic, like you said, the stigma around male mental health. I just want to see what your insight into that is. Do you think it's becoming easier for men to open up about mental health, or do you still think there's a long way to go?
I think there's a long way to go. I think it's getting better. I want to hear your thoughts on that too. But I think, and I've learned through, ironically, TikTok, guys are dumb. Like, guys are so stupid. Like, as a guy, I'm telling you right now, like, whenever I create like mental health videos that will say social anxiety, depression, anything that has like a clinical term to it, guys are turned off by it. When I say to all my tough guys out there, or you word it in this different lingo, guys are more receptive to it. So I think it's a different language if we want to connect with guys than it is to females.
That's interesting.
And based on my analytics, 89% of my following is female. So
yeah, I was just going to say 90% of mine female, yeah.
So the stigmatization there.
That's probably one of my biggest passions as well, to try and get that percentage up. Because, yeah, 10% males, and obviously we know that mental health happens in males just as much as it does with females. Well, maybe anxiety is more prevalent in women, but there's so many more men out there that have stories to tell. And yeah, I think it's just about like coming on here, having discussions like this and spreading awareness. And like you said, just being open and even maybe adapting the language just to start conversations like you mentioned. I think that's a really good way of doing it as well.
And you have over, what, 750,000 followers on Instagram. So you're 90%, 700,000 female followers, let's just say. I think I've been learning, like, what's the best way to target males? I think the easiest way is you have the female following. You should be me personally, I should create content that's like targeted to females to help their males, to help their relationship peers. Because I feel like that would be an easier way for a guy to be receptive to it if we could create that normalized language. So I think there's different outlets to get to males, but it's definitely obviously.
Do you think that would result in the males following the platforms, or do you think that would just more result in the females and males having a discussion together?
I think it's more of a long-term thing. I feel like guys aren't going to be receptive to their females even saying it at first. So I think it's more of they'll see the personal development and then support it. But it wouldn't be an instantaneous thing, I think. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think it'd be good to open up the conversation, and then, like you say, over time, I have seen a little increase. At one stage, it was like 96% women. So gradually getting there, but
Wow.
it's a very slow progress. I do have another question from the followers, which is, what tips would you give to a male if he's scared to open up to his male friends about his mental health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a question that I still struggle with or battle with daily. But I think, like I said, guys are different than girls. And I feel like I was speaking to a psychologist in Melbourne here in Australia, and we were talking about how diffusers help a lot, right? Guys work maybe like when you're playing sport, or you're going for a walk, or you're out and about just with a guy, like you're busy doing something else. I feel like that's a more comfortable setting for me personally as a guy to speak up, as opposed to saying, let's just sit down and have a tea on the couch and chat. I couldn't open up like that. I just wouldn't. So I think getting the conversation started through a diffuser, and I think saying something, just, I'm not doing that well, or I'm really not having a great week. Just something. You don't need to open up everything. Just open the door slightly to express it to your peer. And obviously setting a time that works for both.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah. Especially like you said, that almost that after football talk or talk at the gym, just speak about mental health as though you would speak about how your latest football team's done. We really need to make people aware that there is no issue. You want to be speaking about mental health as much as you are physical health. So yeah, just the more conversations we have, the more easier it'll be for people to speak about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I joined this live not to like maybe even share my insight, because obviously I'm a medical student, not a doctor. I came here honestly, Dean, to like learn from you. So when you ask these questions, I want you to kind of respond and tell me what your best piece of advice is as well, because I want to learn genuinely.
No, yeah, definitely. So the next question, what services do you think we need to improve on a mental health basis?
Yeah, tons, right? I think obviously there needs to be more free or accessible mental health services to low socioeconomic status people. I think community groups. I think
I'm not sure what the national health system's like in Australia, but in the UK, like if you've got anxiety or symptoms of anxiety, what you would do is then you go to your doctor as the first point of call. Obviously, okay. we've got a national health service here, so it is free. Obviously, in America and places it isn't. And then your doctor would then refer you on to either a counsellor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or they would obviously recommend medication if they thought that was the best route. Is that the same practice where you are?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. The whole paid thing, though, it was, I think, don't quote me if I'm wrong, because I just moved here in January, so a lot of these things are new to me as well in Australia. But I think it was like 6 or 7 psychological services you could receive a year free. But I think they upgraded that to 20 or 22 per year. So it was a huge change that they made, I feel like, a few weeks ago. Because I think that's really important, right? To have enough free services where you can feel like you develop that rapport and relationship with whoever you're speaking to actually create change, come back, make the changes, and then move forward. So that was a really big thing. I'm originally from Canada, so it is free, and I'm fully on board with that whole premise as well.
Yeah, and for me, obviously, the longer I've been in the mental health community, the more I become to realise that we really need to start talking about mental health and having mental health discussions as young as possible, and it needs to start in schools. So yeah, I think that's a passion of mine as well, to try and create more speaking about mental health, even small CBT techniques, and just the discussion around anxiety and depression, because I'm sure you can be aware on this. The first time you experience anxiety is obviously always the most frightening time, because you're not aware of what these symptoms are and what they're doing. It's the education behind the anxiety and depression and mental health that can really start to decrease these symptoms. So I think, yeah, starting psychoeducation as early as possible would be a big step.
So my question to you is, how would you incorporate that into like a grade school program or in the classroom setting, or how would you do that? I'm curious.
I think, like you say, I think a classroom setting, just like you've got a physical education class, why not have a mental education class? There's room for it there. We had the discussion on the platform, so I think we put the question out, and a lot of people came back and said, well, mental health, and this was teachers as well. They said, well, mental health really needs to start in the house, so that you need to learn about anxiety in your household. And there was a discussion between people, and I've speak to a lot of peers, a lot of psychologists, a lot of psychiatrists as well, who really believe that the education system, we should be starting as early as possible.
I fully agree. And I think with TikTok, not even TikTok, but social media as a whole in 2020 and Generation Z, I think they're the ones that are going to lead this change. And I feel like they're fed up with it and they're more self-aware than I was as a generation. And I think that is something that is incredible to see. And there was a question I had for you. What was I going to ask? Yes. So how long have you been doing this for on Instagram or social media, the anxiety page?
Yeah, so just we started in July 2018, so just over 2 years on Instagram, yeah.
So my question to you then is, what change have you seen in terms of like the receptiveness of speaking of mental health over your 2 years of doing this?
It's a very good question. So what I've seen is openness and almost a community feel. Is I had the idea. I went through a panic disorder roughly around 10 years ago when I lost my father, and it was my older friend that actually helped me overcome a panic disorder, because he'd actually been through a panic disorder in the past and overcome it. And it was him speaking to me directly, almost like he'd been wearing my shoes. Like, this guy was speaking to me better than any doctor was speaking to me. He was saying, yeah, you're feeling this. Well, let me tell you that these symptoms are because of this, this, and this. And everything that he said really hit home. And yeah, I owe so much to this guy. And so at the time, I thought, how can I bottle this feeling up and spread it across, like, to as many people as possible? So that's why I came up with the idea of Instagram. And yeah, it's just a real community feel. I often describe it as like a virtual community center. Everyone's obviously on their own journey to recovery at different stages, but everyone's obviously sharing tips that are working for them. And yeah, the amount of mental health recovery stories I hear, it's just what motivates me to carry on and keep spreading the word.
Yeah, I think it's the multitude of perspectives. Like, that is what obviously helps with like people, because not everything works for everyone. But there's not a better feeling for me personally when someone says, thank you for your videos. Because of this, I went and I like sought support, or I went and I took to the next step. And I think that's like my, like, as a like advocate, not like, I'm not certified, but like, I think as like from where I'm standing at this point in my career, it's like, if I can give you there's enough vulnerability and people are sharing their story and you feel confident to go and seek this support, I am so blessed. And another thing, I'm assuming you see it all the time too on your Instagram, is when people maybe DM you or something, say like, you saved my life, or you changed my life. And it's like, no, Dean and me did not do that. We're just random people who created content and connected with, but you saved your life. You made the change. You took action. And I think putting that onus on them and recognizing that they're the ones that are doing that I think that's what social media should be about. Like, creating.
No, definitely. The amount of people I've had as well saying, oh, well, I've been dismissed and I've been called weak with my mental health, and realizing that coping and dealing with a mental health struggle is the strongest thing, and seeing that they're encouraged and they've got the motivation to carry on. Like you say, there's no better feeling, is there?
No, it makes you want to, obviously, okay, you're like, there's a purpose here. I'm going to post more. I'm going to do more. And it's just a chain reaction. Random question for you. Gotta ask it. Alessia Cara, how? Explain.
No,
I
obviously.
saw that, I'm like, damn, that was amazing. It's a great live, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, we just reached out because do you know the song she did with Logic, the suicide awareness song?
Of course, of course.
Um, I
The one eight
watched,
hundred, right?
yeah, yeah, I watched it on YouTube. Don't know if you've seen it, the live version.
No, I haven't seen the live version.
All right, so she's like at an award. I think it was the Grammys they were at, and what they did, they brought on, I think like 20 to 30 suicide like survivors who'd survived either attempting suicide or suicide like thoughts, and it was such a powerful moment. And I just thought I really need to reach out to this artist because I know that she speaks openly about mental health to her followers. I knew that she'd have a story and she'd be able to relate to the community. And it was brilliant. She was lovely.
Yeah, and I think I love to reach out to like musicians as well because I feel like musicians, they're all about being vulnerable and opening up, and like I think to really make good music you need to be really self-aware, right? And I think people look up to that, and it's just like it's inspiring to hear, and it's amazing that you're able to connect with Alessia. She's obviously incredible, and that song's one of the most powerful songs of the last few years. Yeah.
I've got another question from the followers is, how do you approach people? Because obviously you're trying to get the message out about mental health awareness, how important it is to speak up. How do you approach people who may be dismissive of the message that you're trying to give?
As in, they're like not liking what I'm saying, or they're like turning me off, because most of what I do is on social media, right? I don't see the person.
As if they're saying, yes, like anxiety, mental health conditions don't exist. So I don't know why you're speaking about anxiety is like the cool thing to say.
Yeah. I think so, like on TikTok or like social media, I'm very fortunate like yourself to have a positive community supporting, and I don't get a lot of like hate comments or like mental health isn't real or anxiety, just toughen up. But I've been fortunate to be featured in some really good articles. Like there was one on the Daily Mail where they featured my TikTok, and the article went viral for the wrong reasons. There was over like 1,400 comments on the article, and probably like 800 or 900 of them were like exactly what you're saying, the dismissive of mental health and anxiety and depression, and this guy needs to shut up and just toughen up, or just stop being emotional, or just like all these things, right? And I think that's the issue. I mean, that's the reason why there is an issue. So I think addressing those people and transitioning my energy and giving it to that versus the actual community I care about that are the ones that need it, it's a waste of time. It's like going against a brick wall. I think it's more focusing on the people who are receptive if you want to really create the change. So I don't respond to people who are dismissive. That's like the long-winded journey of it. I try to keep my energy in the right way, in the right space.
Yeah, I've sort of got like the same sort of answer. Obviously, with that as well, I think that's like a media thing as well. For them to focus on the negative aspects is what we see in the media, isn't it? But yeah, like as a community sort of on Instagram, I always think the people that are being dismissive or they may be trolling the account, obviously hurt people, we know this. So I always think even though they're being horrible on the account, hopefully they might skim past a post and think, hey, do you know what? That relates to me. And maybe they'll get some good out of it. So do you try and look at the positive side of it?
Absolutely. So like I'll either not address it at all, or if I respond, obviously respond with compassion. Because if you're laying in bed and you're typing on this random dude's account how anxiety and mental health is not real, they're obviously not in a great space, right? So like obviously try your best, because then whether it's 10 minutes or a year down the line and they go back to the comment or they see it and they're like, yeah, he was right, or they'll eventually come around to it. So I think it's about just always seeing it from a perspective of compassion and just understanding.
That's fantastic. And I know you asked some of your followers if they had any questions. Don't know if you want to get them out onto the live, or if you've got any other questions yourself.
Oh yeah, got tons of questions, and I read through them, and I think the biggest questions were, well, give me 1 second, I'm gonna pull them up right now on my laptop.
Cool. What are you going to do with this sunshine today?
What's up?
What are you going to do with this sunshine today? You're going to make the most of it?
Do you want me to lie to you, or do you want me to make you, like, tell you the truth?
Tell me the truth, yeah?
I'm going to the beach in about an hour. So I'm going to go hopefully find some wallabies or kangaroos and go to the beach. So I have no complaints, to answer your question. That's the truth, bro. I was going to say I'm going to go inside and study, but today's too gorgeous, and I have nothing to do. So biggest questions when I said DLC anxiety, tons of questions was love is a cow, and I think people want coping mechanisms, tips, strategies, something, maybe like 2 or 3 things that you can feel that are like practical, that are most people could take advantage of, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so with myself, like I said, I went through a panic disorder. The number one thing that helped me overcome a panic disorder was exposure therapy. Now, this is normally something that has to be done with a therapist or under the supervision of a psychotherapist. And there's 2 options. So you can go down like a flooded exposure therapy. I used to get panic attacks in shopping malls. So a flooded exposure would be like just going straight into the center of the shopping mall and feeling that anxiety and just being in the situation that's making you feel uncomfortable. Over time, what happens is that decreases, and that's how I got out of a panic disorder. There is another way of doing it, which is called gradual exposure, and that would be maybe driving to the bottom of your road on the way to the shopping mall. All depends what works best for an individual, and both sides scientifically are equally as good. So it's about finding a tailor-made thing. Another thing for myself, I don't know if you agree, but breathing techniques. Obviously, we know when we're anxious, we are breathing all incorrectly. Shallow breathing, which is creating too much carbon dioxide in the blood, and that's just going to create this anxious response. Deep breathing, deep belly breathing, I found was really beneficial. And also, I'm a big advocate of mindfulness. You can do it anywhere. Just even if it's 2-3 minutes, just sit down. Be comfortable with your own thoughts. A lot of people say, how do I get rid of these thoughts? I've got these irrational thoughts. How do I get rid of them? And it's not about getting rid of them. It's about changing your behavior to them. So me and you, we could have the same thought. I could be anxious and really dismissive of this thought, and my physical symptoms would be symptoms of anxiety. You could react a different way, and your symptoms would be symptoms of calm. So it's not the actual thought that creates the anxiety, it's the way that you react to it.
I think that's everything. And that's something that I learned this year I wasn't aware of before. When I spoke to a friend, he gave me a really good tip. It was called creating these micro goals. So you don't know when you're going to feel bad or not great or when it just hits, right? So like, I'll tell myself, so if it's like Thursday, 6:32 p.m., I'm laying in bed and I feel bad. I'm thinking about something, clicks. Okay, I'm in an anxious place. I'm in a stressful place or real bad place. I'm aware of it. I say, okay, Zach, you feel this way. So what I'm going to do right now on my phone, I'm going to set an alarm to 7:02 p.m. So I'll set this 30-minute alarm to allow myself to flood these feelings and let myself feel. But at 7:02, I'm going to go take a shower, go for a walk down the street, go call my mom, cook something. Just some micro goal to allow myself to then transition out of that state. Because otherwise that takes up your day, your week, your month. It's easy to stay in that space. But I'm at the same time not afraid to allow myself to experience that. Because before I used to say, I have to be perfect. I can't feel weak. I can't be depressed. And I think that just dug deeper and deeper and deeper and then never let me really be like, so like the mindfulness and exposure therapy is about being self-aware that you were speaking on. So I think that's a really important thing. And I want to talk a little bit more about self-awareness. Do you have any tips for people who aren't self-aware, how they, other than those 2, which I think are incredible, to become more self-aware?
It's like you say, I think you said at the start of the live, you're a big fan of journaling. I really believe in journaling. And just sitting, like you say, it's about being self-aware, sitting with your thoughts. A lot of people with anxiety, they say, how do I get rid of this anxiety? How do I get rid of these thoughts? What they need to do is that they need to be, like you say, be able to sit with the anxiety. And when you're trying to be get rid of something, you're almost shining a spotlight on the thing, and you're creating more fear. So it's like putting petrol onto the anxiety. You're really fueling it. So sitting with the anxiety and just being comfortable and being aware, I think, like I said about the psychoeducation, of the thoughts, being aware of the physical symptoms, and just really, I think, learning and understanding about each and every symptom. So a lot of people, they're scared when the heart is racing, but knowing that that response is a less response than if you was on a treadmill. A lot of people say, oh my God, my heart's racing, I must be having a heart attack, not knowing that really, in retrospect, the heart's not beating that fast because they're not sweating, they're not in a cardio sort of setting. I think that that's really important, just knowing that the symptoms of anxiety, that they won't hurt you. And yeah, well, it's a system that's there to protect you, isn't it? And we wouldn't have evolved as a species, would we, over time, without this system. So anxiety can play a positive role, and it's just about finding what works best for you.
Entirely. The fight or flight mechanism of the body is incredible. My question to you now is, I'm sorry, I'm asking so many questions, but like, we as humans, I find, learn best through personal experience. People telling you something is not the same power as you going through it, unfortunately. Otherwise, we could be like gurus at like 12 years old if you're friends with an 80-year-old. But the best way, I think, to learn from anxiety, like you were saying, is like knowing and being aware of what these symptoms might mean, is through previously, like yourself, when you're kind of experiencing those symptoms, and okay, this is what this means. Like, I've experienced this before. How can we develop something that's powerful enough for someone who's experiencing it for a first time to be as self-aware and receptive? Like the education before that. Do you get my question?
How can we what, sorry?
So like, imagine you've never experienced anxiety or panic attacks or anything, but being self-aware that these symptoms or these things mean these things, so I know I can take action. So like, how can we develop an educational tool or something that would be a resource that people would be receptive to like take in before they've ever experienced it for the first time? Because after you've experienced it, you're much more open.
Yeah. So obviously, like you say, with anxiety and anxiety recovery, the way to recover it is, like you say, it is actually experiencing the anxiety. But it goes back to having to start the education start the education of anxiety and mental health in the education system. Knowing there's only two ways that you're going to know about anxiety. That's either going to be through education that's going to start in the family, it's going to be through friends, colleagues, whatever, who's been through an anxiety disorder, or it's going to be through experiencing it yourself. And like you said, people who haven't been through an anxiety disorder really they don't connect as well as someone who has been through an anxiety disorder. And I think that's why DLC anxiety is so powerful and so popular, and because people really can find that connection between each other, between the experiences that they share. Everyone's experience isn't the same, but I think it's that struggle and that struggle to want to recover and just obviously be themselves anxiety disorder. I think it's that motivation that carries everyone through.
Yeah, I think having the community and the support that you've created is priceless for people that are either experiencing it or have experienced it or just want to learn. So I think having the education plus the support system that you've developed online and that I'm trying to work on developing as well is really, 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 really important. I've joined a few of your lives, and oftentimes I feel you talk about CBT. Can you kind of explain a little bit more what that is to people who don't know what that is and how they can use that?
Yeah, of course. So CBT, so exposure therapy that we touched on before, is like a subsetting of CBT. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. In England, in the UK, it's the most sought after route, really, probably before medication. That they try and get you through to speak to a counsellor, speak to a psychologist, and it's about sitting with your thoughts. It's about yourself, like you say, about being aware, self-aware of everything around you, and being aware of the behaviour to the thoughts. So you might see on Instagram or wherever the thought cycle. So thoughts equals behaviour, thoughts equals emotions equals behavior equals action. So when I think something, I feel this certain way, and then I react a different way. So it's about being aware of the thought, being aware how you change your behavior to the thought, and then being aware, obviously, if you start to avoid something, what that does is that really puts the fuel on the anxiety. So it's about really going toe to toe with anxiety. And a lot of people find that when they do go toe to toe with anxiety, that it isn't as scary as what they thought. And you feel that when you start to go toe to toe with anxiety and feel these symptoms, you start to see the cracks in anxiety, and you start to see that this is temporary. This isn't ongoing. A lot of people say, you say that anxiety is only temporary, but I've been dealing with it for 4, 5, 10 years. But I think the message that we're trying to get out there is that everyone can deal with anxiety, and it's the anxious response that is temporary. There's only so much adrenaline that one can burn. And then when that adrenaline is gone, the anxiety level is going to come down. It might go back up again, but then it'll come back down. So yeah, I think that's really important.
I do think that's really important, knowing that, I like how you said it, the body can only respond so long to like a fight or flight or sympathetic response. Mm-hmm. It's going to burn out, or there's no way this is going to happen. Like your body can't do it. So I think logically thinking it from that perspective, I like that a lot. I've never heard that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing that. Was there
I just wanted to add to that, sorry. So with CBT, you can actually, there is self-help CBT that anyone can search on Google, and you can really like go through like self-help courses. I've seen free ones online as well. So there is resources for people to really dig deep and practice these techniques that are scientifically proven to be just as effective in some people as medication. So CBT is really a good route for everyone to start with.
Well, Dean, I'm going to need you to send me whichever one you'd recommend on a website after this chat, so I can put that in my bio as well. For Instagram and TikTok. I think that'd be very, very helpful. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I know there was tons in the chat. We really didn't address that, and I feel bad for not doing that. But I just wanted to say, Dean, thanks for doing this live with me, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. I did want to ask you about TikTok. So we were speaking about education, about people learning about anxiety at a younger age, and that's where I'm really take my hat off to everything that you're doing on TikTok. Because I'm going to ask you, but I believe that it's a younger audience than maybe on Instagram. What is your demographic on there regards to an age?
So mental health is universal, and everyone experiences it at different ages. So I'll have people who are 12 who talk about it. I have people who are 65 even on TikTok that talk about it in the comments. But my majority of my demographics, because it is TikTok, is probably 13 to 19. I'd say like Gen Z, like that young age.
What sort of percentage would you say that is?
It's like between 60 and 70%. Between like 16 to 24 is what it says, because I think you have to be 16 or 13 or 16 to be on TikTok. Okay. But large, probably like two-thirds I would say.
Yeah, I think that's incredible what you're doing, because on Instagram, you're looking at mid-20s, like to late 20s is my demographic. And there is younger people on from the age of 13 up to that age, but that percentage isn't there. So I think you're really speaking to like you say, to a generation that might not be hearing it on any other platform. So what you're doing there is incredible.
Thank you, Dean. And I'm just trying to do, like, obviously it's not an educational piece, but like I know how important it is, maybe for a teenager who's experiencing it alone or unaware of those thoughts. Like, I know obviously we want to get this in like primary schools and programs, but I'm trying to figure out what's the best way I can help people who are young enough to like be like, okay, I'm not gonna let this happen to me, or I'm gonna learn from this and help other people with it. And been very fortunate that TikTok has worked as well as it has. But I appreciate you doing this with me, Dean. Most importantly, and yeah, extremely inspired by your platform, not your account, the platform and community that you've created.
I appreciate that. And for everyone who wants to support you on your journey, so you said you've got a podcast. Would you like to just go into detail about what you discuss on there, where people can find it?
Yeah, so the podcast is called You Matter Most, and that's like the saying. So You Matter Most podcast, you can find that on Apple Music, Spotify, whatever way you listen to a podcast, it's there. So You Matter Most podcast, and we just started season 1. And the whole premise around the podcast is bringing on people who are either the top in their field when it comes to speaking on mental health, or lived experience people such as, I don't know if I want to drop any names, but big people who are very, very, very fortunate to have connected with, to either share their raw experiences and their story, or people who can provide, just like Dean, really sound advice from a professional level to help you along your journey. So it's called You Matter Most, and it's around the premise of destigmatizing and normalizing mental health, remembering that you're number one.
No, that's fantastic. And if people want to follow you on Instagram, it's MDMotivator, is it? Yeah.
You got it. Instagram and TikTok's MDMotivator. And the website is mentalhealthmovement.mvmt.com. And that has my socials, it has the podcast, it has everything right there. That'd probably be the best way. But yeah, I appreciate everyone that joined us live. You're very fortunate to listen to such a experienced man as Dean. So thanks, Dean.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for coming on, mate, and I really appreciate it. Continue doing the good work. I'm really happy that we connected, and yeah, thank you for getting up early and speaking to me. I appreciate it. Obviously, that it's early in the morning there. I'm normally tucked in bed at that time, so thank you.
No, thank you. And if you're ever in Australia, Dean, you're more than welcome.
No, I appreciate that, mate. But stay in touch, and yeah, I'll send you some information on CBT that I think you'll find interesting. And just keep spreading that word, keep spreading the positivity. And just before you go, I saw your freestyle. Well, the freestyle with Harry Mack, yeah.
yeah.
I came across that on YouTube when I was doing a little bit of research. Yeah, I thought it was really good. Like,
he's amazing, isn't he?
What?
He's amazing.
No, he is. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, enjoy your day, enjoy the beach, and yeah, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Dean. I appreciate it. We'll stay connected. I look forward to seeing those DMs.
Brilliant. Take care. Yeah.
Bye, guys. Bye, Dean.